Well, Walker Kessler was on the trade block, but then it seemed like he wasn't. Things are getting a little bit interesting in Utah outside of Lowry Markkinen, and today we're gonna shed a little bit more light on it. Hello there, my name is Wraith Hoops. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. If you're into NBA basketball, I cover it all year. With that being said, let's go ahead and hop into this one. Early on in the offseason, it was expected that Walker Kessler would be one of the pieces that was potentially tradable previous to the NBA draft. Some people thought that they would end up shipping out Walker Kessler in exchange for a pick that would allow them to move up in the draft and grab the likes of a Stephon Castle or even a higher regarded player, but it ultimately didn't end up happening, but for good reason, because the Jazz ended up being able to bag 3 solid players without having to move up in the draft at all. With that being said, that still didn't quiet down the rumblings of Walker Kessler potentially getting traded. And allegedly, they received a possible trade package that would have included 2 first-round picks. It was previously stated that Danny Ainge was unwilling to move Walker without at least 1 first-round pick, but the fact that the Jazz ended up turning down 2 just simply implies one of 2 things. Either A, the picks were heavily protected, or B, they really don't want to trade Walker and we're just kind of testing out the water to see who would want it. We know teams like the New York Knicks have been really big suitors looking for a backup / starting center because they lost Isaiah Hartenstein to the Oklahoma City Thunder this offseason. But Walker Kessler, while he does have a similar game, I suppose to a certain extent, as Isaiah Hartenstein, I don't think that he's as stout as necessary to fill that role. He's a solid rebounder, but he doesn't have the same touch that Hartenstein had. And considering the fact that Hartenstein could also be a little bit more of a passing hub in the short roll game, and Walker doesn't necessarily have that as a piece of his game, much less a jumper very much at all, things would get a little bit hairy there. So that combined with the fact that they literally traded their entire future for the next 6 years in exchange for Mikal Bridges, it doesn't seem like the most likely thing for them to go ahead and have something in the cupboard to spend on Walker Kessler like that. So I would rule them out as the team that gave up 2 firsts. But that makes me think that the 2 firsts either were from a team that wasn't going to have very much motion as far as those picks being worth anything, despite them being first. So probably a current playoff team that's already heavily in that market, or they were just heavily protected, which I believe is also probably more likely than anything else. And either way, it depends on how much you value Walker Kessler. If they were just looking for first round picks at all, because all first round picks aren't considered equal, then they would have already taken this deal. But for the fact that they did not, symbolizes to me that they value him a little bit more and they're having a little bit of faith. Yes, he did have a down year last year, and they were expecting him to take a step forward, and it seemed like a step kind of sideways, backwards, James Harden style perhaps. But overall, I don't think that it's time to surrender him yet, myself personally. Yes, I enjoy Kyle Filipowski, and after a couple of Summer League games, I enjoy what I'm seeing from him, but I also see the improvements that he can and will eventually make, hopefully during his rookie season, but regardless, as his career gets a little bit later in. I think that Walker Kessler has some positives to be had, but I also think that there's some glaring negatives, like his weakness as far as hands and touch goes around the rim. He's not the strongest, so he did, for example, struggle with Zach Edey, who got a significant number of post touches, and while Walker was battling it out with him down there, he still wasn't able to be the dominant, going into your 3rd year type of player that we would love to imagine him to be against a rookie that allegedly the Jazz were interested in potentially drafting, but he just wasn't there when they were ready to get him. I think that it makes the most sense to believe that Walker Kessler is a tradable asset and he is shoppable. Concerning the fact that Lowry Markkinen is also a shoppable asset, I think that anybody on that roster is potentially available. There haven't been that many rumblings about Colin Sexton or Jordan Clarkson or John Collins, but at the same time, I think that 2 of those are because of their contract situations, and then Sexton just kind of slides under the radar despite how good he was, ironically enough. I think that overall people put too much stock into the possibility of him getting traded. And while I do think there are some teams that would benefit from it, it just comes down to the right price being met to the point where Danny Ainge feels like he kind of has to sign his name on the dotted line because he holds his cards very close to the vest. That entire front office does. And the idea is if you want us to make a trade, overwhelm us with a trade. You need to wine and dine us for the trade, because if you don't and you get us a pizza from Cece's or from Little Caesars, it's not going to cut. We're not dropping the draws. It's just not worth it. And I understand, because I do see the potential of Walker Kessler to be not only an elite blocking big, an elite rebounder, and a strong lob threat. And I would love for him to add a little bit of a more consistent jumper to his bag and honestly just hit more free throws, because 50% is not cutting it. I need at least 65 to 70%. I mean, north of 70 would be delicious, but we just haven't seen enough of that out of him. So I don't want to set that expectation right now, because for one, I need either a jumper or I need the weight room. He needs to pick one and get it fast, because that first game against the Memphis Grizzlies Summer League team, admittedly it is a Summer League game, you don't want to get anybody injured, it still left much to be desired. He wasn't as dominant and as forthcoming and as cocky and confident as we saw Keontae George be. Now, granted, Keontae George missed a significant number of shots, but also hit almost all of the darn near 20 free throws that he attempted that game. And he was talking trash the entirety of the way. So he felt a lot more confidence. He was also more defensively sound. I like that Walker was willing to battle it out with whoever came at the rim, and he was willing to try and get those blocks. He also got a couple fouls here and there, but this is Summer League, so you can do that. But I don't think that there's going to be too much news going forward. I do believe that they're still going to shop around, and I think there are a couple teams that would be benefited by adding him to their fold, even if not as a starter, definitely coming off the bench, because his shot blocking prowess is second to probably 3-ish people in the league, and really 2, if I'm going to be quite honest with you. To mind, it only comes Victor Wembanyama and then Rudy Gobert, because from a block perspective and the percentage of blocks that were attributed to them on all the shots that were attempted while those players were on the floor, Walker Kessler, if memory serves me right, was third in that metric behind those two. So needless to say, elite defender, just offensively not having the best luck, and that could be attributed slightly to the fact that there's no elite point guard that's been with the Utah Jazz to set him up and put the ball right where it needs to be for him specifically to do the most with it. He is 22 years old. He was the number 22 pick back in the 2022 NBA draft, a lot of 22s there. And after 2 less than spectacular seasons, a total averaging 8.7 points, 8 rebounds, and 2.4 blocks, across a span of 138 games, by the way, only 62 of them being starts though, I think that there's a lot of room for growth for Walker Kessler, and I expect him to grow a significant amount going forward. Whether he does end up traded from the Utah Jazz, or if they decide to slot him in front of Filipowski, I think that it will be interesting to see how things develop as far as this trade continues, and we will continue to cover it as it goes. Again, we don't know 2 things. Number 1, who the team was that offered the 2 first. And because we don't know that, we don't know why they turned down the deal. So my personal best guess is the fact that it was probably heavily protection ladled and less so the type of team that the first were. Because even if it was, say, the Milwaukee Bucks or the Lakers that wanted to go ahead, for example, the Lakers would really benefit from this because AD is a solid 5, but he does his best damage from the 4, and then you can slide LeBron back to the 3. In that world, though, Walker doesn't necessarily fit things perfectly from an offensive standpoint because he's not a passing hub, nor is he a solid shooter, but that defensive prowess and that rim protection allows AD to roam and have more of a Jaren Jackson type of role, which would boost his shares and win shares on that side of the floor. And even if you were to trade away some of those Lakers picks, they wouldn't be worth anything in the immediate future that would be too transcendent. But even if they're in the mid-20s without protections, if you get 2 of them, that's a great deal, especially for Walker Kessler at this stage in his career. But if those picks from whatever team are heavily protected and the likelihood of us actually getting those picks is highly unlikely, then I could see why there's a lot of head scratchers. And it's like, you know what? You can go. But either way, like I said, we'll cover it on this channel as much as possible. And if a deal does get made for them or any other player on the Utah Jazz roster, you'll be here to hear it first. With that being said, thanks for tuning in this video. Go and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and become a member to help support the content. Drop your thoughts on it below. Do you think Walker Kessler will get traded? And if you're kind of up in the air about it, what team would you like to see him go to? Or do you think he could do his best damage with the Utah Jazz uniform on? With that being said, it's your boy Ray Hoops. And as always, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.